The Grand Galactic Arena was a marvel of technology and tradition, a place where the strongest warriors from countless species clashed to prove their dominance. It was a massive coliseum, its walls lined with banners from every known civilization, flickering holograms displaying past champions and upcoming matches. The crowd roared with excitement as the next battle was announced, the energy rippling through the stadium like a living force. Warriors of all shapes and sizes had gathered, their voices blending into a cacophony of deep growls, high-pitched chatter, and guttural roars. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the spectacle they relished, the utter humiliation of Earth's so-called fighters. On one side of the battlefield stood Exor the Unyielding, the undefeated champion of the Intergalactic Combat League. His crimson-scaled body was layered with ceremonial battle plating, adorned with sigils of his many victories. He was massive, standing over 9 feet tall, his 4 powerful arms flexing as he cracked his knuckles. The ground beneath him trembled slightly as he stomped forward, his golden eyes scanning the arena with an expression of amused contempt. He had bested the finest warriors from across the stars, and today he would add another effortless victory to his record. The laughter began as soon as the human stepped into the ring. He was diminutive in comparison, a mere shadow beside Exor towering form. Takashi Kuroda, dressed in a simple black GI, his dark hair tied back in a neat knot, walked calmly to his designated position. There was no armor, no weapons, no cybernetic enhancements, nothing that screamed strength or power. He stood still, hands folded in front of him, his head slightly bowed as if in quiet contemplation. The crowd's reaction was immediate. The laughter spread like wildfire, deep, rumbling guffaws from behemoths, chittering amusement from insectoid spectators, even the announcers struggling to contain their disbelief. One voice finally echoed through the stadium's intercom, barely suppressing mirth. It appears Earth has misunderstood the nature of the competition. This is a contest of warriors, not entertainers. Even some humans in the audience exchanged uneasy glances. Their representatives in past tournaments had always relied on brute force technology, exoskeletons, energy weapons, mechanical augmentations, yet none had lasted longer than a few moments. But Takashi stood motionless, unaffected by the noise around him, his expression unreadable. Exor grinned, flexing his claws. "This is what your people send? A fragile creature who thinks meditation will save him." His voice was deep, resonating across the battlefield, filled with amusement. "I will end this quickly." The massive gong sounded, signaling the beginning of the match. The moment it did, Exor exploded forward, his immense weight moving with terrifying speed. His first strike came like a meteor, one of his massive fists hammering down, powerful enough to shatter steel. Yet in the blink of an eye, Takashi was no longer there. Gasps rippled through the crowd. No one had seen him move. Exor snarled and swung again, bringing his second set of arms into play, lashing out with crushing force. Still, the human remained untouched. Takashi moved like a whisper, his body flowing between the blows with an ease that seemed almost supernatural. He did not block, he did not strike back, he simply avoided every attack, his breath steady, his face calm. The laughter in the stadium had stopped. Frustration flashed across Exor face. He widened his stance, planting his feet and preparing for a full-force charge, his bulk becoming a living battering ram. He lunged, swinging with all 4 arms, determined to seize the elusive human in his grip. Takashi did not retreat. Instead, he stepped forward, closer to his opponent, slipping beneath the incoming blows with a precision so fluid it seemed effortless. Then, with a movement so subtle it was almost imperceptible, he placed his palm against Exor chest, right at his center of gravity. And he pushed. There was no strike, no explosion of force, no dazzling display of power. Yet, against all logic, Exor massive body lifted off the ground. His own momentum betrayed him. In an instant, he was airborne, flipping over himself before crashing onto his back with a thunderous impact that sent tremors through the battlefield. The entire arena fell into stunned silence. Exor lay there, blinking in shock, the wind knocked out of him for the first time in his life. He struggled to process what had happened. He had not been struck down. He had been redirected. His own force had been used against him. A single tone rang through the stadium. The massive floating holographic display above the battlefield flickered, then displayed the word, Victory. For the first time in the history of the Intergalactic Combat League, Exorvath had been defeated. Silence reigned in the crowd, disbelief hanging thick in the air. The human had not fought with brute strength, with weapons, with technology. He had fought with something else entirely, something unseen, something none of them could grasp. Takashi Kuroda turned, bowed slightly, and without a word, walked calmly out of the arena. The human delegates stood frozen, then erupted into cheers, while the alien warriors remained seated, their minds struggling to comprehend what they had just witnessed. The arena remained eerily silent long after the battle had ended. The moment Takashi Kuroda had left, the spectators, once so eager to mock humanity's so-called fighter, sat in stunned disbelief. Exorvath the unyielding, the undefeated champion, still lay where he had fallen, staring up at the shimmering energy dome overhead. His 4 powerful arms twitched slightly as if trying to comprehend what had just happened. He had felt no impact, no true force exerted upon him, yet he had been utterly dismantled. Slowly, he pushed himself up, his massive form casting long shadows under the arena's bright lights. The murmurs in the crowd grew as he finally stood, his golden eyes no longer filled with arrogance but with something else, uncertainty. In the high balconies overlooking the battlefield, the Galactic Council members exchanged glances. They had convened to witness yet another predictable humiliation of Earth's warriors. Instead, they had seen something none of them could understand. Ambassador Krell, a towering reptilian diplomat from the Drexel Dominion, narrowed his slitted eyes as he replayed the moment in his mind. "That was not a victory of strength," he muttered, his deep voice tinged with confusion. "It was something else." General Orvax of the Vothari war clans, a species known for their brutal military campaigns, scoffed, though there was a note of unease in his tone. "A fluke," he rumbled. "The human did nothing. Exorvath fell by his own folly." Yet even as he said it, his gaze drifted to the combat footage playing across the arena's massive holographic screens. Slow-motion replays showed Takashi moving with inhuman grace, his every step measured, every motion purposeful. There was no wasted energy, no aggression, only precision. At the diplomatic delegation platform, General Reyes, Earth's highest military representative, stood with his arms crossed. His expression was unreadable, but those who knew him well could see the glint of satisfaction in his eyes. He had been forced to listen to years of ridicule from the other factions in the Intergalactic Combat League. Humanity was always seen as weak, too dependent on technology, too fragile to ever compete on a galactic stage. Now, everything had changed. A chime echoed through the stadium, signaling an official review. In the heart of the chamber, Exorvath turned, his gaze locking onto the judge's booth. "I demand an explanation," he growled, his voice reverberating through the halls. "How is this a defeat? The human never struck me." The head arbiter, an ancient, crystalline entity known as Solvier, tilted its prismatic head, its multifaceted eyes flashing with internal calculations. "Victory in combat is not solely defined by brute force," Solvier said in its ethereal voice. "Victory is defined by control. You were bested because your opponent controlled the engagement entirely. His techniques dictated the outcome. You lost, Exorvath." The crowd stirred, the weight of the statement settling over them. The idea was foreign to many of them. In nearly every known civilization, combat was a measure of power, a contest of overwhelming strength, speed, or weaponry. But here was a human, a species many had considered unremarkable, winning with none of these. Exorvath clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. "Then I demand a rematch," he declared. "I will not be undone by mere trickery." Solvier's crystalline form pulsed softly. "The challenge has been issued. Does the human accept?" All eyes turned to the Earth delegation. General Reyes gave a small nod to an attendant, who activated a communicator. Takashi Kuroda's calm voice came through the speakers. "A rematch is unnecessary," he said, his tone as serene as ever. "Exorvath has already lost, not just the match, but the understanding of why he lost. Until he accepts that, another fight would be meaningless." Exorvath's fists trembled at his sides. The words struck deeper than any blow could. The sheer confidence in Takashi's voice was infuriating, because he could not refute it. He could not understand how he had lost, and that lack of understanding burned more than the defeat itself. Solvier turned back to Exorvath. "Do you insist?" The warrior remained silent for a long moment. His entire life had been built upon the idea that strength was absolute. He had trained in war, had shattered adversaries with sheer force, had earned his title through overwhelming might. And yet, today, that foundation had been cracked. His golden eyes flickered toward the screen, displaying the slow-motion playback again. Takashi's movements had been so subtle, so controlled. There had been no aggression, only mastery. With a deep exhale, Exorvath took a step back. "No," he said finally, his voice quieter than before. "A rematch would be meaningless." A new kind of murmur rippled through the audience. It was not the jeering mockery from before, nor the simple awe of an unexpected outcome. It was something deeper, a realization that the galaxy itself had just changed. General Reyes turned to the representatives of the other civilizations, a small smile playing on his lips. "I believe," he said smoothly, "that it's time we discuss what humanity truly brings to the table." The meeting chambers, once so dismissive of Earth's capabilities, now buzzed with quiet deliberation. The concept of war and combat had been irrevocably altered. Strength was no longer the only currency of battle. As Exorvath walked out of the arena, he did not feel anger. Instead, for the first time in his life, he felt something else entirely. The meditation chamber aboard the starship was a stark contrast to the brutal Colosseum where Exorvath had faced his first true defeat. The walls were constructed of dark, polished metal interwoven with strips of softly glowing energy, casting an ethereal light across the chamber. One side of the room was entirely transparent, revealing the vastness of space beyond, distant stars burning in the void, nebulae swirling in vibrant blues and purples. It was a place of contemplation, of stillness, something completely foreign to the warrior who now stood at its center. Exorvath remained motionless, staring at the human who had undone him. Takashi Kuroda sat cross-legged on the smooth floor, his posture relaxed yet impossibly balanced. His breathing was slow, controlled, as if he were barely tethered to the physical world. He had invited Exorvath here, not to fight, not to gloat, but to understand. And for reasons he could not fully explain, Exorvath had come. The silence stretched between them, heavy but not oppressive. It was a silence of purpose, of invitation. It was not a demand, nor was it a command, it simply was. Exorvath, for all his years of battle, for all his mastery of combat, did not know what to do with such silence. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Takashi opened his eyes. His gaze was steady but not piercing, calm but not passive. He gestured to the space in front of him. "Sit." The great warrior hesitated. He, a champion of his people, was not accustomed to taking orders, let alone from a human. And yet, the way Kuroda spoke, it was not an order. It was an offering. Slowly, with the grace of a predator still uncertain of its surroundings, Exorvath lowered himself to the floor. His massive frame settled, his forearms resting upon his knees. He could feel the tension in his own muscles, the way his body remained ready for a fight that would not come. Takashi studied him for a moment before speaking. "You are still preparing to strike." Exorvath frowned. "I am prepared for anything. That is the problem." Exorvath's golden eyes narrowed. "Preparation is never a weakness." Takashi exhaled, slow and measured. "No, it is not. But being prepared for everything means you are never truly present in any moment. You are always in the battle before the battle even begins." The words unsettled Exorvath in a way he did not understand. He had spent his entire life training, honing his body, sharpening his instincts. Strength had always been his answer, preparation his foundation. And yet, here was a warrior who had defeated him without a single strike, telling him that perhaps he had been doing it wrong all along. Takashi reached into the folds of his robes and withdrew a small, glowing orb. It pulsed gently with light, no larger than a stone, hovering just above his palm. "This is a simple training tool," he explained. "It responds to energy, to motion. If you act with force, it resists. If you try to command it, it flees. But if you allow yourself to move with it, to understand its rhythm, it will remain with you." Exorvath watched as Takashi let the orb drift from his palm, his hand moving in slow, deliberate motions, guiding it effortlessly through the air. The orb seemed to dance with him, as if responding to his intent rather than any physical force. Takashi extended his hand. "Try." The warrior hesitated. This was foolishness. Child's play. But still, something in him, perhaps the part that had been shaken by his defeat, compelled him to obey. He reached out, attempting to grasp the orb. The moment his fingers moved with intent, the orb darted away. His brows furrowed, frustration flickering through him. Again he tried, this time swiping at it with precision. Again, it eluded him. Takashi smiled slightly. "You are trying to control it." Exorvatha's jaw tightened. "That is the point of control." Takashi shook his head. "Not everything is meant to be controlled. Some things are meant to be understood." Exorvath sat back, exhaling sharply through his nostrils. He had never felt so off balance without even standing. He was a warrior. He had bested champions, crushed armies. And yet, here, in this moment, he was utterly lost. Takashi placed the orb back into the air, letting it drift once more. "Let go," he said quietly. "Do not try to command it. Simply move with it." Exorvath stared at the glowing sphere, his instincts warring within him. Then, slowly, hesitantly, he extended a hand again. This time, he did not try to grasp it, did not try to claim it as his. He simply moved. The orb hesitated, then, almost imperceptibly, it followed the motion of his hand. For the first time, the great warrior felt something he had never felt before in combat. Not power. Not dominance. Not control. Harmony. The moment passed quickly, but the impact remained. Exorvatha's expression was unreadable as he withdrew his hand, watching the orb return to stillness. Takashi studied him for a long moment before speaking. "You are strong, Exorvath. But strength is only one path. You have spent your life preparing for battle, but you have never prepared for peace. A warrior who only knows war is incomplete." Exorvatha's fingers curled slightly. "You think I should abandon my path?" "No," Takashi said simply. "I think you should broaden it." The silence stretched between them once more, but this time it was not uncomfortable. It was contemplative, thoughtful. The ship hummed around them, the stars beyond glimmering like ancient sentinels. Finally, Exorvath spoke, his voice quieter than before. "Show me more." A small smile touched Takashi's lips. He gave a slight nod, the first step of understanding finally taken. And so, in a chamber suspended between the stars, a warrior who had known only battle began to learn the art of stillness. The monument stood at the heart of the Galactic capital, a place where the towering spires of alien architecture met the tranquil serenity of carefully cultivated green spaces. The city itself was a marvel, a fusion of countless cultures, a place where beings from every known world could walk together beneath the glow of twin suns. The skyline was alive with shimmering lights, hovering transports gliding soundlessly between structures that touched the clouds. Yet, despite the breathtaking technological advancements surrounding it, the monument itself was simple. Two figures, one human and one alien, sat across from each other in meditation, their hands resting lightly on their knees, their expressions serene. The sculpture was carved from a single piece of obsidian-like stone, dark and smooth, as if untouched by time. Beneath it, an inscription gleamed in soft golden light, etched in dozens of different languages, each translating the same simple truth: true power is knowing when not to use it. A steady stream of visitors moved through the plaza, pausing to take in the monument, some in silent contemplation, others discussing its meaning with hushed voices. Among them, a towering Volthar warrior stood, his thick, plated skin reflecting the light of the setting suns. His kind had once believed that strength was the only truth, that power was to be demonstrated, not questioned. But now, as he looked upon the monument, he felt something stir within him, an uncertainty he would have once dismissed as weakness. He had not been at the battle, had not seen the humans' victory firsthand, but he had heard the stories. The warrior who had won without striking. The battle that had ended with a bow instead of blood. He clenched his fists, staring at the meditative figures before him, and for the first time in his life, he wondered if strength alone had ever truly made him whole. Nearby, a Tarkash scientist, her golden eyes sharp with curiosity, watched as a group of younglings from various species played on the grass surrounding the monument. A small human child sat cross-legged, eyes closed in mimicry of the sculpture, while a gelatinous Ziffler youth wobbled beside him, struggling to maintain stillness. A young Cordali, all sharp angles and spiny ridges, huffed in frustration. "How is this supposed to be a lesson?" he grumbled, shifting restlessly. "Sitting does nothing." The human child opened one eye. "Maybe that's the point." The Cordali scoffed. "That's ridiculous." The Tarkash scientist allowed herself a quiet chuckle before turning her gaze back to the monument. She had spent years studying interspecies psychology, fascinated by the human tendency to challenge established beliefs in ways no one else had considered. They were unpredictable, defiant, sometimes reckless, but they were also capable of reshaping the very fabric of thought itself. She pulled out a small holographic recorder, dictating her observations. The presence of the monument has led to a marked increase in philosophical debate among species traditionally focused on warfare. Notable shifts in perspective observed among the Volthar and Cordali populations, she trailed off, glancing at the human child who had resumed his stillness, his tiny chest rising and falling in slow, deliberate breaths. With a thoughtful expression, she added, "Perhaps the greatest influence humanity has had on the galaxy is not their strength, but their willingness to redefine it." Further away, an aged diplomat, her robes embroidered with the insignia of the Galactic Council, stood with an old adversary, a general from a species that had once been at war with her own. They had spent decades negotiating treaties, had argued across tables in tense debates that had shaped the fate of entire civilizations. Now, they stood side by side, watching as a new generation learned a different way. The general, his tusked face lined with age, exhaled deeply. "I used to believe," he rumbled, "that peace was merely the absence of war. That it was fragile, temporary." The diplomat nodded. "And now?" He studied the monument, his gaze lingering on the figures carved in stone. "Now I wonder if peace is not something fragile, but something earned. Something that requires strength of a different kind." The diplomat smiled softly. "Perhaps strength has always been about more than war. We were just too stubborn to see it." The last rays of sunlight bathed the city in gold as dusk settled in. The monument stood unwavering, not a symbol of conquest, not a trophy of battle, but a quiet declaration that true power did not always come from victory, it came from understanding. The plaza gradually emptied as visitors moved on, but the message remained, waiting for the next soul who would stand before it, questioning everything they had once believed.